The wealthy man's son had not walked until the day his father witnessed the housekeeper doing something unbelievable. There are times in life when we believe everything is within our reach, that with sufficient effort and belief, we can plan out all our aspirations. These were the initial years for Destiny Williams, a young black woman from the tough areas of Brooklyn, who consistently felt that diligence could alter her family's destiny. Destiny envisioned graduating, securing a stable job, buying her mother an apartment, and sending her younger brother to university. Each morning found her running along narrow streets, her gaze fixed on the gray sky, framed by old brownstones, silently vowing never to quit. She gathered used magazines from subway stations and attended complimentary church classes. Every minor triumph was a foundational element for a brighter tomorrow. However, fate is never a direct path. One terribly cold winter evening, everything shattered. Destiny's father, whom she admired most, suffered a fatal stroke, leaving her, her mother, and her brother to survive on their own. A family that had barely managed financially was plunged into profound debt. Medical bills for her mother, brother's tuition, and utility notices accumulated dramatically. Destiny put away her college books and immediately focused on survival. She worked at fast food establishments, cleaned homes for rich families, served food at upscale cafes, and even swept stairwells in dilapidated buildings. Anything to earn money. Her hands grew thick and chapped from dish soap. Her slender shoulders hunched under the strain of night shifts. Yet, she endured it all without complaint, knowing each hard-earned dollar was crucial for her mother and brother. Still, as life's burdens grew, Destiny felt caught in a relentless cycle. Night after night, she sat by the small window of her cramped apartment, staring at the solitary stars above the city, seeking any glimmer of hope. Her youthful ambitions, once luminous enough to fill her spirit, were now crushed by the weight of obligation, poverty, and apprehension. Then, on a very cold late autumn afternoon, just as she thought her faith had dimmed, hope emerged from an entirely unexpected source. Mrs. Ruth, an elderly neighbor whom Destiny had occasionally assisted, knocked on her door. "Destiny, dear," she stated, "I know a wealthy family on the Upper West Side seeking a live-in housekeeper and nanny. They offer good pay, but their child is somewhat unusual. His mother passed away last year, and he hasn't spoken or walked since. If you need work, I can recommend you." Destiny hesitated. She had never imagined caring for the affluent, especially while still carrying her family's responsibilities. But rent was overdue, her mother was ill, and her brother's future was uncertain. With no other option, she nodded, her heart trembling with a vague sense of foreboding. Still, she managed a grateful smile for Mrs. Ruth. The following morning, Destiny put on her worn coat, placed a homemade lunch into her faded bag, and boarded the northbound subway. The train swayed with tired commuters, each lost in their personal struggles. Destiny pressed her forehead against the window, watching graffiti-covered streets give way to gleaming glass structures, professionals in suits, and polished cars. When she stepped onto the Upper West Side sidewalk, it felt like another reality. Wide, spotless sidewalks lined with amberleaf trees, boutiques where a single dress cost a month's family groceries. Before her stood a luxurious apartment building with doormen in sharp uniforms and a lobby so spotless it shone. Destiny tightened her grip on her tote strap, took a steadying breath, and whispered to herself, "For my mother, for my brother, I must be strong." Her footsteps softly echoed on the marble corridor as she approached an impressive mahogany door adorned with intricate designs. This was the entrance to the penthouse that would, in ways she couldn't yet fathom, transform Destiny Williams's life forever. The heavy mahogany door swung open, and a cold breeze entered with Destiny's steps, carrying the unsettling promise of a morning filled with significant change. She crossed the threshold, her heart pounding not only with nerves but with the acute awareness of how small and out of place she felt in this unfamiliar world. The gleaming marble floor reflected the brilliance of the crystal chandelier hanging from the high ceiling, each footfall echoing like a note in a grand concert. Looking up, she found herself in a magnificent foyer so perfectly arranged it felt unreal. Paintings hung with precise symmetry. A plush charcoal gray velvet runner extended before an electronic fireplace that softly glowed in one corner, and sculpted white orchids stood in immaculate pots, each petal pristine. Alongside a sweeping spiral staircase sat an antique grand piano, its polished surface shining like glass, a silent reminder that here, destiny was merely a speck of dust. This Upper West Side haven, previously seen only in magazines or on her worn phone screen, now appeared in vivid detail. Luxury cars drove by outside the arched windows, high-end boutiques across the street, and well-dressed shoppers entered and exited with cool confidence. Destiny tightened her grip on her tote strap, her palms slick with perspiration. For a moment, she caught her reflection in a nearby mirror, a slender black girl in a threadbare coat, hair tied back in a hurried knot, a solitary brushstroke amidst this masterpiece of extravagance. In that instant, she felt not only that she didn't belong but a primal fear of the unstated rules woven into every tile and essence of this home. If I break one of these, I'll owe more than 3 months' rent, she thought, her throat dry. Before her panic could escalate further, a calm, gentle voice called from down the hall. "You must be Destiny, right?" It belonged to Mrs. Lorraine Blake, a short-haired, silver-haired woman whose steely gray-blue eyes conveyed both experience and authority. Dressed with understated elegance and carrying a leather-bound book, she moved with the confident poise of someone accustomed to managing every detail of her existence. But her smile at Destiny felt softer than anything else in the house. "Come on in," she said. "I've been expecting you. Don't worry. Once you settle in, you'll be fine." That tone and those eyes alone somewhat alleviated Destiny's trembling. Yet her steps remained hesitant as she moved past each object, as if afraid to disrupt an unstated sanctity. Mrs. Blake escorted her along the hallway. "This penthouse was designed by my son, Matthew. He's obsessed with perfection. You'll soon see." The words landed like a subtle caution. Destiny did not dare to ask further but stored them in her mind. When they reached the living room, Destiny was struck by a cold stillness emanating from its slate-gray walls, seeping into every expensive artifact. The vast area felt empty. Everything was so orderly that no spark of genuine life remained. No family photos, no scattered toys, no hastily scribbled notes or draped coats. Although the chandelier's pale gold light bathed the room like honey, it lacked what every home needs most: warmth. What made her chest tighten was not just the unimaginable wealth, but the sense that this place was a velvet tomb, displaying perfection while burying every trace of intimacy. She could almost hear her own heartbeat, a hollow rhythm in the immense space. "Don't mind Matthew if he seems distant," Mrs. Blake murmured, gesturing toward a leather armchair by the window. "He's endured much loss, but I believe one day he'll learn what truly matters beyond perfection." Destiny nodded, feeling both a slight relief and an intense, unsettling apprehension about the true master of this domain. He was more than merely a powerful, accomplished man. He was a soul encased in ice by his pain. A single look or a terse remark could reduce another person to insignificance. In the shadows near the staircase, Matthew Blake stood silently, observing through a reflective pane. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored gray suit. Ash-brown hair slicked back. Lips pressed into a firm line. His presence alone commanded authority. No words were necessary. The room seemed to hold its breath around him. He regarded Destiny with a mix of suspicion and haughty expectation, as though ready to pounce on any mistake. Yet, behind those cold eyes lay a profound exhaustion, a wound no one had alleviated. For Matthew, everything in this house, including its staff, was merely a part of his control scheme, nothing more. Just as Destiny felt herself suffocating between two worlds, the rigid quiet of this sanctuary and the shattered dreams she carried, another door was waiting to open. The true challenge was just commencing. The moment Destiny had not yet stabilized her breathing in the oppressive luxury, a figure descended the staircase, each step measured, decisive, silent, yet somehow causing the entire living room to seem to pause. There stood Matthew Blake, tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, his light brown hair slicked back, every feature of his face as sharply defined as marble. Everything about him exuded absolute control, from the way he slipped his hand into his pocket to the frosty glance he cast over Destiny, to the barely perceptible press of his lips, all of it outlining an invisible boundary she dared not cross. But the most unsettling aspect of Matthew was his eyes, steely gray-blue, bright yet edged with sharpness. His gaze was like a thin blade. It swept over her and left a cold cut beneath the skin. Behind that handsome exterior lay wounds no one had touched. Whenever those eyes fixed on Destiny, she felt disdain, suspicion, and a warning, like an imperfection in this impeccably clean home. Mrs. Lorraine smiled and introduced her, but Matthew merely inclined his head. No polite smile, no handshake. He didn't ask Destiny a single question, only assessed her from head to toe, judging her suitability for this pristine space. "If Mother chose you, it must be all right," he said evenly, almost without emotion. "Just ensure you don't complicate things." Each word from Matthew sounded both like a greeting and a veiled threat to her presence there. Destiny squared her shoulders, refusing to look down. She met Matthew's eyes for one steady second, enough to perceive not only his coldness but the deep scar beneath. Someone who once loved too intensely, now wielding power and rules to shield his own pain. She offered a small, calm greeting. "Hello, Mr. Blake. I'm Destiny. I'll do my best." Matthew did not reply. He turned back to his mother to briskly inquire about schedules and safety rules, then disappeared down the hallway into his study. The door closed with a stark click that echoed through the room, an unyielding barrier. The air felt heavier afterward. Destiny knew that to Matthew, she was merely a substitute housekeeper, valuable only for maintaining order and cleanliness. He did not trust her, did not care about her origins or the aspirations and sorrows she bore. To him, Destiny was an object that could be discarded the moment she aired. A mixture of anger and hurt swelled in Destiny's chest. She recalled her father's words, "No matter how others see you, walk with confidence. No one can take your worth away unless you let them." She vowed not to shed a tear, not to allow herself to be belittled, even in this frigid mansion. Yet, Destiny's very presence, the stark contrast of a young black woman from Brooklyn in Matthew's world, quietly disturbed the long-dormant calm. Each time she moved about, cleaned, cooked, or simply exchanged a soft word with Mrs. Lorraine, Matthew sensed a strange imbalance, as if a single stroke of color had disrupted his meticulously controlled grayscale canvas. He was annoyed but couldn't stop observing her. Her steady patience and hopeful eyes became both the source of his suspicion and his confusion. How could someone like Destiny dare to enter his domain, where he was accustomed to setting boundaries and pushing everyone away, especially anyone perceptive enough to see the fragile, wounded soul beneath his proud exterior? From that moment, a silent conflict began, Destiny's courageous struggle for her family's survival against Matthew's cold, unforgiving defenses, born of his fear of loss. No one could have known then that this seemingly routine introduction would ignite the upheaval that would change both their lives forever. The heavy door to Samuel's room slowly opened, extending the impact of Destiny's encounter with Matthew into a new space. Though here there was no aura of power, only a bone-chilling silence. Destiny stepped in, her hand trembling slightly, her eyes taking in the pastel-hued room, every object arranged as precisely and artfully as in an expensive magazine spread. The large room was filled with natural light pouring through a wide window overlooking the park. Sheer white curtains drifted in the faint breeze. Along one wall, shelves held dozens of stuffed animals, toy car models, and building blocks, all pristine, untouched by any real childhood mess. In one corner stood a low bookcase stacked with fairy tales in English and French. Beside it, a watercolor easel and a full box of crayons remained ready. Yet, in this playroom full of toys, not a single sound of childhood floated through the air. No laughter, no running footsteps, not even the faint rustle of crumpled paper. The atmosphere was thick, cold, and stagnant, as though time itself had frozen around the loneliness residing in every shadow. On the pale gray shag rug by the window, 4-year-old Samuel sat curled up. His fine blonde hair was tousled, his pale skin sharply contrasting with the oversized navy sweater draped over his small frame. His deep gray eyes stared out the glass as if pursuing something distant. In his arms, he clutched a worn bunny plush with threadbare ears, his sole link to reality. Destiny froze at the threshold, her heart tightening at the sight. In an instant, she perceived the child's isolation, his unspoken pain, and the invisible fear he carried. Motionless, unblinking, he appeared petrified, his spirit hollowed out by an ordeal no child should endure. Mrs. Lorraine quietly approached and placed a gentle hand on Destiny's shoulder. Her voice was soft and sorrowful. Since his mother passed, he hasn't spoken or walked. Every specialist, doctors, psychologists, has been powerless. Samuel has constructed an invisible barrier no one can penetrate. Destiny felt a pang in her own childhood memories. Nights her father was absent, her mother ill, the terror of abandonment with no one to hear her cries. She looked at Samuel and saw, behind those glazed eyes, a small soul trapped between a world of luxury and absolute solitude. Gently, Destiny knelt beside him, maintaining a respectful distance from his safe zone. She didn't speak. Instead, she placed her tote on the floor, produced a worn fairy tale picture book, and began turning its frayed pages. In a low, soothing voice, she recited the stories her mother once told her, letting the words soothe Samuel like a gentle lullaby. He did not glance her way. His body remained stiff, his grip on the rabbit tightening. Yet Destiny did not give up. She stayed for a long while, her gaze fixed on Samuel, offering the only warmth she could in this storybook-chic yet ice-cold room. From outside the doorway, Matthew observed in silence. His expression was more somber than usual, filled with both irritation and helpless despair. He watched Destiny and Samuel, two individuals from distinct worlds, each confined by their own unseen barriers, and felt a stirring of unease he couldn't identify. The silence persisted, seemingly impenetrable. But Destiny recognized that this quiet was not emptiness. It was a suppressed plea for assistance, a fragile spirit longing for a gentle hand. Deep in her heart, she understood that pain all too well. She, too, had been a child no one heard, no one inquired about, no one reached out to. And in that moment, Destiny quietly vowed to herself that no matter how much time it took, she would discover a way to bring Samuel back to life, whether through a single glance of connection, a tiny smile, or the softest, most reassuring touch of her hand. From the very moment Destiny exited Samuel's silent room, she knew the true struggle was just beginning, and that her greatest adversary wasn't the loneliness of a frightened child, but the invisible walls constructed by adults, walls that Matthew Blake had reinforced more firmly than anyone. Each morning before dawn, Destiny rose and moved through the house like a phantom. She polished every walnut tabletop, dusted each bookshelf, buffed every corner of the cabinets, meticulously rearranged the plush toys, inspected bed linens and curtains, even smoothed the tablecloths until each fold lay perfectly. Whenever she heard Matthew's footsteps descending the stairs, the air in the mansion seemed to grow colder, heavier, as if his presence drained warmth from the walls. Matthew never offered a good morning. Instead, he observed her with an evaluating gaze, sometimes as icy as winter wind, sometimes a casual glance that concealed a razor-sharp scrutiny. A single speck of dust, a stray drip on the kitchen counter, or a spoon left slightly askew could prompt one of his biting remarks. "How long did you leave that floor cleaner on the wood? The dishes in the dishwasher aren't dry. Check more carefully next time. Samuel's food needs finer cuts. Don't change the menu without permission." Each insignificant comment accumulated into an invisible burden on Destiny's shoulders, keeping her in a constant state of alertness, never knowing when one error might cost her job. Approaching Samuel proved even more difficult. Whenever Destiny attempted to sit beside him, he would either retreat further into his own world, or Matthew would reappear unannounced, his eyes narrowing with suspicion and frustration he didn't even recognize in himself. At times, if she lingered too long telling a story or sang him a lullaby too softly, Matthew would intervene with a curt frown. "Leave him alone. Don't complicate things. Let the doctors handle it." Matthew's need for control extended far beyond the kitchen, cleaning, or Samuel's daily routine. He would patrol the house, checking every cupboard and trash bin, demanding to know why she chose one brand of soap over another. Not a day passed without Destiny feeling under scrutiny, judged like an outsider clinging to ground that was never truly hers. Often, exhaustion and humiliation left her on the verge of packing up and leaving in the middle of the night, especially after he had chastised her for making Samuel cry during a simple story time. The baseless blame stung, and she questioned if she had the strength to endure this harsh environment. In those darkest moments, Destiny retreated to the small maid's quarters at the end of the hall and called home. Her mother's frail but loving voice would break through the line. "My daughter, your father's gone, and your brother and I are counting on you. I know it's hard, but our family will survive if you don't give up." And her little brother's determined promise, "Destiny, as long as you stay, I'll study my hardest. Someday we'll have a better life." Those simple words were the spark that kept her resilient. She knew that if she could just hold on, if she refused to let Matthew's coldness extinguish her hope, things might still change. But each day brought new challenges. Matthew's aloofness was not merely an attitude, it was a fortress built from his own losses and unhealed wounds. Destiny sensed it in every sigh he thought no one heard, in every tight line around his eyes when he believed she wasn't observing. Once she overheard him on the phone in his study, his voice rough as he spoke of Samuel. "No, my son doesn't need friends. Stick to the treatment plan and don't ask about his mother again." That trembling edge in his tone, a mix of anger and helpless fear, revealed the terror beneath his icy veneer, the fear of loss and of failing to protect the one he loved most. Destiny realized then that her presence, a poor black girl from Brooklyn, was the unpredictable element in Matthew's meticulously ordered world. It unsettled him, compelling him to scrutinize and test her, hoping she would resign on her own so he could close off his private domain forever. But Destiny, with her quiet determination, her growing connection with Samuel, and her love for the family she had left behind, chose to remain. She faced those oppressive days and the relentless coldness of Matthew's gaze because deep down she believed that even the firmest walls could be breached. The days in the penthouse merged together like frozen moments. Every movement, every breath, every sound seemed to slow under the weight of the invisible pressure Destiny felt so acutely. The suffocation came not only from the endless, repetitive chores but from a growing fear in her heart, the fear that she would never truly reach Samuel. After only a few attempts at connection, Destiny discovered something that broke her heart. Samuel was terrified of being touched. If anyone came too close, especially an adult, he would shrink inward, clutching his worn bunny toy so tightly, eyes wide as if bracing for something terrible. He recoiled from hugs, trembled if any hand rested on his shoulder, and even flinched back when Destiny tried to move a book near him. The first time she tried singing him a lullaby, a gentle melody her own mother had sung to soothe her, Samuel stared blankly, then suddenly squeezed his rabbit, face ashen, breathing ragged, and allowed a single tear to slide down his cheek. Destiny fell silent. She understood that Samuel didn't dislike her, he was simply afraid. Afraid of anything connected to adults, of the closeness every child deserves, yet had never experienced. As soon as Matthew heard the faint song drifting from Samuel's room, he appeared, his face hardening as if he had just discovered a serious error. "What are you doing? Nobody needs lullabies here. Don't take the liberty of consoling or changing anything. I only wanted to help Samuel feel more comfortable. Just follow the doctor's orders. Don't bring your own emotions in here." His gaze cut like a blade, cold and tinged with frustrated anger. For Matthew, control was not merely a habit, it was his sole defense, the armor he had constructed around unspoken losses. In his view, any minor change posed a threat to the fragile world he had built for his son and for himself. From that point on, Destiny's every action was micromanaged. She could only read certain short stories, allow Samuel to play only with toys Matthew had pre-approved, and stay in his room only during strictly set hours. If anyone else entered, she had to leave immediately. Even meal preparation was bound by a rigid menu. No creativity was permitted, not even a star-shaped apple slice. Yet, the worst part was not the rules. It was witnessing Matthew terrify Samuel to the point of shaking. One weekend afternoon, Samuel accidentally spilled orange juice on the rug. A tiny mishap. But Matthew stormed in, eyes dark, voice sharp. "Samuel, how many times have I told you to be careful? This room isn't for destroying." The boy panicked, curling in on himself, lips quivering, hands over his head as if bracing for a storm. Destiny rushed forward to shield him. But Matthew's glare stopped her cold. "Step it. We don't need any heroes here." Samuel's soft sobs filled the air, barely a sound, yet choked in his throat. Destiny felt helpless, watching the man who seemed immune to pain become the very source of the boy's greatest fear. Tears welled in her eyes, but she turned away, biting back the words she knew would change nothing. That night in her small room at the end of the hallway, Destiny sat by the window, staring into the darkness. She was no longer strong. Tears soaked her pillow as the helplessness, anger, and sorrow of seeing Samuel so terrified twisted in her chest. She wondered if she truly possessed the strength to see this through. Because it was not just Samuel who required saving, but Matthew, trapped in his own psychological gloom, where control only caused further destruction. Then, from the depths of her childhood memory, her father's voice whispered, "Sometimes light appears only when you dare to step through fear. No one can save you but yourself." Destiny wiped her tears and made a silent vow. Tomorrow she would start anew, refusing to yield. Because if no one remained by Samuel's side, who would guide him out of this darkness? The following morning, Destiny awoke early as always, her eyes still swollen from tears, but her face firm and resolute, with no crack in her determination. She slipped through the silent hallway, rain pattering against the windows, cloaking New York City in a heavy gray haze. Inside the penthouse, every sound seemed muted, and the air felt thick with an unnamed weight. But within Destiny, a small flame burned, an unspoken stubbornness no hardship or tears could extinguish. She thought of Samuel's pale face and the way he closed his eyes whenever adults raised their voices. His fear mirrored the child she had once been, the child who awaited someone brave enough to stay and genuinely care. That morning, after completing her chores, Destiny entered Samuel's room as usual. He sat by the window, clutching his old bunny, his eyes fixed on the rivulets of rain sliding down the glass. In past days, Matthew's constant warnings, controls, and rules had kept her hesitant. But today, beneath the downpour outside, Destiny felt a clarity. If no one dared to break this cycle, Samuel would remain trapped in his icy cage forever. Gently, she pulled a small, bright green hand puppet, a goofy dinosaur she had saved up to buy at a flea market, out of her coat pocket. Keeping a respectful distance, she spoke softly, "Hey there, anyone up for a dinosaur story today?" Samuel didn't turn around, but Destiny persisted. She began to tell a tale in a silly voice, making the puppet dance and roar in a ridiculous fashion until, with a sudden slip, the dinosaur tripped on a banana peel and fell flat on the rug, flailing its arms as if in pain. "Oh no, dinosaur slip. Ouch." She let out a playful whimper, then had the dinosaur struggle to its feet, grimacing, and shuffle towards the bunny Samuel held. And then it happened, soft as a breeze, through a cracked door as small as a raindrop falling in silence. Samuel emitted a tiny laugh, at first barely more than a breath, then a genuine little chuckle. His eyes widened, a faint spark of joy illuminating them, though his lips pressed together as if afraid to cross some unseen boundary. Destiny held her breath, daring nothing more than a gentle smile. She continued the puppet's antics, this time staging a dramatic tumble into the bunny's lap, and they all laughed together. Samuel covered his mouth but couldn't conceal the slight shakes of his shoulders. Joy, however fleeting, had reached him. In that laugh, Destiny knew she had cracked the thickest shell around his heart. What Destiny didn't realize was that outside the door in the dim hallway, Matthew Blake had been standing silently for some time. Leaning against the wall, rigid, he peered through the narrow opening. That tiny laugh echoed farther and louder than any sound in the house had in over a year. For the first time in a long time, Matthew felt a wave of confusion. Astonishment mingled with doubt, equal parts joy and fear. He dared not step inside, partly due to pride, partly disbelief that a mere housekeeper he had always dismissed could touch his son's heart with something so simple. Deep inside, tumultuous questions surged. Had he been wrong all this time? Were his rigid rules and strict control the very barriers driving Samuel further away? Silently, Matthew turned and walked away, carrying those tangled emotions with him. He didn't know whether to feel anger, relief, or shame. His long-hidden weakness and helplessness were laid bare by a brief, innocent laugh. But for Destiny, that moment planted a seed of hope. In the penthouse's oppressive gloom, a sliver of light had finally pierced through, fragile yet not easily extinguished. She didn't expect a miracle, but she knew this. As long as she persevered, as long as there was laughter, there would be a chance to free Samuel from his lonely cage. The days in the penthouse stretched on like frozen moments. Every movement, every breath, every sound seemed to slow under the crushing pressure Destiny felt so acutely. The suffocation came not only from the endless chores, but from a growing fear in her heart that she might never truly reach Samuel. After only a few attempts, Destiny discovered something that broke her heart. Samuel was terrified of any touch. If an adult came too close, he would shrink into himself, clutching his ragged bunny so tightly, eyes wide as though waiting for something terrible to happen. He recoiled from hugs, trembled if anyone touched his shoulder, even flinched away when Destiny simply tried to bring a book within reach. The first time she tried singing him a lullaby, a gentle tune her mother used to soothe her, Samuel stared blankly, then suddenly squeezed his rabbit, face drained of color, breath ragged, and a single tear slipped down his cheek. Destiny fell silent. She understood. Samuel didn't hate her. He was terrified of the very closeness every child deserves. The moment Matthew heard her singing drift from Samuel's room, he appeared, face darkening as if she'd committed some grave offense. "What are you doing? No one needs lullabies here. Don't take it upon yourself to comfort him or change anything. I only wanted to help Samuel feel more at ease. Just follow the doctor's orders. Don't bring your own feelings into this." His gaze was as sharp as a knife, cold, laced with frustrated anger. For Matthew, control wasn't mere habit. It was the only defense he had, the armor he'd built around unspoken pain. To him, any small change threatened the fragile world he'd crafted for his son and for himself. From then on, Destiny's every move was restricted. She could read only approved short stories, let Samuel play only with toys Matthew pre-screened, and stay in his room strictly during allotted hours. If anyone else entered, she had to leave at once. Even meal times were bound by an unyielding menu. No creativity allowed, not even cutting an apple into a star. But perhaps the cruelest blow wasn't the rules. It was the afternoon she watched Matthew terrify Samuel into shaking. One weekend, Samuel accidentally spilled orange juice on the rug. A tiny mishap. But Matthew stormed in, eyes blazing, voice snapping. "Samuel, how many times have I told you to be careful? This room isn't for making messes." The boy panicked, curling in on himself, lips quivering, hands covering his head as if huddling from a storm. Destiny rushed forward to protect him, but Matthew's glare stopped her cold. "Step it. We don't need any heroes here." Samuel's muffled sobs filled the silent room. Destiny felt helpless watching this man, once seeming invincible, become the source of his son's greatest fear. Tears stung her eyes, but she looked away, biting back the words that would change nothing. That night, in her tiny quarters at the end of the hall, Destiny sat by the window, staring into the darkness. She wasn't strong anymore, her pillow soaked with tears as anger, helplessness, and grief knotted in her chest. She wondered if she truly had the strength to see this through, because it wasn't just Samuel who needed saving, but Matthew, trapped in his own dark prison, where control only deepened the wound. Yet from the depths of her memory came her father's voice. "Sometimes light appears only when you dare to step through fear. No one can save you but yourself." Destiny wiped her tears and vowed. Tomorrow she would begin again, refusing to give up. Because if no one stayed by Samuel's side, who would lead him out of this darkness? The moment Destiny's door clicked shut behind her, tears still wet on her cheeks, the penthouse grew even heavier. A tense silence spread through every room like the onset of the longest night. Destiny felt all her hard-won effort slipping away in an instant, every fragile hope swept aside by a cold, merciless storm. But in that stillness, Mrs. Lorraine, who had watched silently until now, decided she could stand by no longer. She strode into Matthew's study where he stood alone by the window, shoulders trembling with anger or exhaustion. She couldn't tell. She didn't mince words or offer empty comfort. "Matthew, you think you're protecting Samuel by controlling everything, but you're really punishing yourself and pushing your son further from the love he needs most." Matthew turned, eyes rimmed red. His first true display of confusion and hurt beneath that cold facade. "You don't understand. If anything happens to Samuel, if I lose him like I lost Anna, I wouldn't survive." Mrs. Lorraine stepped closer, placing a firm, gentle hand on his shoulder. "Your fear has made you a stranger to your own son. Samuel needs a father who dares to love, not a warden. Sometimes the only way to become stronger is to admit you're weak." Her words shattered the final piece of the wall Matthew had constructed around himself. He lowered his head, his legs no longer steady. The pride that had shielded him from loss lay broken. In that vulnerable moment, Matthew saw that he had not only hurt Destiny, the only person brave enough to enter Samuel's world, but had become the source of his own son's fear and loneliness. That night, as Destiny sat motionless in her room, a quiet knock came at her door. Matthew appeared, no longer bearing his usual rigid composure. He entered and stood in silence for a long moment before speaking, not in commands, but in a desperate plea. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was just so terrified. I didn't know how to save Samuel. I can't bear to lose anyone else. I thought controlling everything would protect him, but instead I only made things worse." Destiny was stunned. Behind that cold, authoritarian exterior stood a father broken by helplessness and haunted by his own failures. His eyes now held emptiness, powerlessness, and the deepest fear. Silently, Destiny sat beside him, hands clasped together. She told him of her own childhood, of her father's sudden passing, of her mother and brother struggling in their dilapidated apartment, of nights spent wide awake in pain and fear, knowing that one unforeseen tragedy could cost them everything. "I used to believe that if I controlled everything, if I never let myself be weak, I could hold on to what I loved. But I learned that only patience and the courage to share our fears can help us overcome the loss we dread." Destiny's simple, heartfelt words, devoid of blame, served as a balm for Matthew's long-suppressed wounds. Side by side, two people from opposite worlds found they shared the same pain. The terror of losing family and the burden of feeling they must confront it alone. After that night, a quiet transformation began to unfold in the penthouse. Matthew started to perceive Destiny with new understanding. For the first time, he sought her opinion on Samuel's schedule, listened to her gentle suggestions for meals, routines, and even the light exercises he had once forbidden. The harsh commands and vigilant glares vanished, replaced by cautious but genuine trust. And for the first time, Destiny felt a true partnership in the endeavor to guide Samuel back into the light. Together, they sat down and planned the days ahead. The small games, the gentle workouts, new books to read, the bedtime stories to share. These minor steps marked the most significant beginning of all, the commencement of a healing journey that no longer required either of them to stand alone. After that night of tears and honesty, a new atmosphere quietly spread through the penthouse. Gone were the weary glances, the curt commands, and the invisible distance separating the three of them under one roof. In their place came small, simple signs of revival. Most importantly, Matthew's first genuine initiative. The next morning, it was Matthew who brewed the coffee, placing a cup beside Destiny as an unspoken thank you. He did not remain secluded in his study as usual. Instead, he approached Samuel and Destiny, asking about Samuel's morning, what he liked to eat, and which stories he enjoyed. Though sometimes awkward, his gaze was gentler than Destiny had ever seen. In the days that followed, Destiny no longer tiptoed around every small decision. She confidently organized activities for Samuel, and to her surprise, Matthew joined in, once assembling Lego with her and his son on the living room floor. Another time, he fumbled while chopping vegetables in the kitchen, then blushed with laughter when Destiny teased him about cutting carrots into giant slices. One afternoon, under soft sunlight, Matthew carried Samuel out onto the balcony. The three of them sat on the lounge bench, pointing out sparrows hopping on the railing, naming the passing clouds, telling stories about the bright red bus rumbling by on the street below. For the first time in months, the house resonated with soft laughter and the everyday conversation only a true family shares. Destiny became the core of every connection. No longer merely the housekeeper, she gradually earned Matthew's sincere respect. He sought her opinion on new menus, listened when she suggested light exercises and outdoor explorations for Samuel. Mrs. Lorraine also regarded Destiny with gratitude and pride, silently knowing that Destiny had not only saved Samuel but had also touched Matthew's heart. Samuel's recovery unfolded gradually, but unmistakably, like a miracle. He began to utter his first syllables. Small words like ma, da, cake, and sis rang out, filling the house with joy. One day, Samuel bravely held onto a chair to stand, then beckoned Destiny over with a hoarse but determined voice. Each time Samuel smiled at his father or nestled close to Destiny to hear a story, Matthew felt a stinging in his eyes. He realized that true happiness did not reside in perfect control, but in those tiny moments, each warm hug, each trusting glance Samuel gave him, to Destiny, and to their home. In just a few weeks, the once icy penthouse had become surprisingly warm, mornings fragrant with toast. The living room was strewn with Lego bricks and colored pencils, the balcony sparkling in the afternoon sun to the sound of a child's laughter. Destiny no longer felt like an outsider there. She had become its heart, the pulse that connected each member, the keeper of hope, inspiration, and new life in a home that had once felt like a velvet tomb. And from that point on, Matthew not only felt gratitude but began to admire her. He learned to listen, to share his deepest thoughts with Destiny. He understood that the journey to bring Samuel back and to heal their family truly commenced when they dared to trust, to set aside fear and pride, and to reach out for one another's hand. It seemed as though the sparks of hope and the laughter of a child had warmed the penthouse for so long. But when the rainy season returned, New York once more donned its familiar cold, old gray cloak. That evening, thunder rumbled across the sky, and sheets of rain lashed the windows, threatening to wash away every new ember of warmth under the Blake roof. Suddenly, the entire apartment was plunged into complete darkness as the lights went out. Thunder boomed, wind howled through the cracks, and Samuel trembled and began to cry in the unfamiliar darkness. Destiny scooped him into her arms, soothing him with gentle reassurances, while Matthew rummaged for a flashlight in the kitchen drawer. Mrs. Lorraine lit a few old candles, and they huddled together in the soft golden glow. In that space, with the wind screaming outside, all the boundaries of social standing, past hurts, control, and suspicion melted away, leaving only the rare intimacy of people who had once been strangers. After his tears subsided, little Samuel nestled into Destiny's lap, his hiccuping sobs fading into sleep. Matthew sat beside them in silence for a long time, his gray eyes reflecting the exhaustion of someone who had battled inner storms for far too long. The candlelight highlighted the hard lines of his face, yet couldn't conceal the uncertainty in those eyes, strong and yet deeply fragile. On that rainy night, as if by fate, Matthew spoke aloud for the first time the words he'd never dared share with anyone else. "You know, I used to think I was the strongest person alive. I took pride in everything I built, our happy family, until that terrible night. Anna, my wife, was gone in an instant. Everything collapsed. I still hear the shattering glass, smell the lingering scent of the ambulance siren. I couldn't do anything. I stood there powerless, watching the person I loved most slip away forever." His voice dropped to a whisper. After the funeral, all I felt was rage and guilt. Samuel. He was too small to understand, but every time he looked at me with his mother's eyes, I saw only my own failure. I was so afraid, I only knew how to control and set rules, thinking that would protect us, but I only made things worse. Destiny fell silent at the raw honesty of his pain. In the flickering candlelight, she saw someone she barely recognized beneath the impenetrable mask, a man lost in memory and unnamed sorrow, a father tormented by his own helplessness. Gently, she took his hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze, then softly shared her own story of nights in a cramped, dark apartment, of rain leaking through the roof, of her mother's cough echoing through the quiet hours, and the daily fear of losing her family and her only home. I grew up in the darkness of poverty, always afraid I'd lose my mother, my brother, or the only roof I had. Sometimes I thought I had to freeze my feelings just to survive. But I learned that only when we dare to open our hearts, to embrace our weakness and pain, can we truly receive the good things we deserve. Her simple, heartfelt words became the anchor for Matthew's wounds. Their eyes met across the candlelight, and all barriers fell away. Two wounded souls realizing they'd found a haven of peace where they could finally rest, and someone who truly understood the weight they carried. Outside, the rain softened. The wind no longer battered the windows. Inside the apartment, that newfound closeness became an unspoken promise. They would not let life's storms wash away the fragile trust they'd kindled, and they would not turn away from this second chance fate had so rarely granted to hearts so weary. When the stormy night finally passed, the penthouse seemed to burst into life under the first rays of morning sunlight. Destiny woke to find Samuel still sleeping peacefully beside her, and Matthew seated at the breakfast table with haunted, deep-set eyes, evidence of another restless night. The weariness had faded, replaced by a fierce resolve as though he'd just emerged from a long internal battle. After breakfast, Destiny hesitated, then shared the idea she had been nurturing, a decision that might forever alter Samuel's fate. I've read about a special therapy center in Seattle. There, experts use a multisensory approach combining music, animal interaction, and movement therapy for children who've experienced trauma like Samuel's. I believe if he could be in a new environment, spend time with animals, hear natural music, a miracle could happen. Matthew listened in silence for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the window where the morning light streamed in. In the past, he would have dismissed such a proposal immediately, rejecting any change to his meticulously laid plans. But now he understood that to genuinely save his son and himself, he had to trust and overcome his fear of failure. Slowly, he nodded and reached for Destiny's hand, feeling at last the steady heartbeat of a determined father. Let's try. We'll go all the way together, whatever the outcome. Within a week of preparations, the three of them, accompanied by Mrs. Lorraine, departed for Seattle. On the plane, Samuel was still quiet, but his eyes showed life, and his tiny hand no longer clutched the old bunny so desperately. Instead, he gently touched Destiny's or Matthew's finger now and then, as if making a silent promise. The therapy center was situated amidst lush pine forests outside the city, its spaces alive with birdsong. There, Samuel met friendly golden retrievers, was guided through music rooms, engaged in gentle movement with balls and swings, and listened to soft guitar music in the physical therapy suite. Destiny and Matthew took turns by his side every day, cheering on every small step, every sign of progress. A lifted gaze, a tentative smile, a braver sigh. On the first day, Samuel remained withdrawn, allowing only the most necessary touch. Yet the warm atmosphere, the playful dogs, and the soothing morning music gradually healed his wounds. After several patient sessions, Samuel surprised everyone by picking up a ball himself and sitting up on the mat without support. Matthew watched with tears in his eyes. He dared not blink, afraid the happiness would vanish if he looked away. By the 10th session, in the golden Seattle afternoon light, Samuel suddenly rose, wobbled a few steps, and looked toward Destiny and Matthew with bright, shining eyes. Then, in a trembling voice that filled the room, he whispered, "Mommy." At that moment, Destiny and Matthew both burst into tears, tears of joy, faith, and the reward for all their silent efforts. Samuel ran into Destiny's arms first, then clung to Matthew, calling out again, "Mommy, Daddy." In that cry, years of hurt, anger, fear, and guilt were washed away. Samuel had not only found his voice, but he had also granted Destiny and Matthew a new beginning, the opportunity to be true parents, to start over, to live authentically with love and emotion. For Destiny, Samuel's first mommy, was the miraculous proof of perseverance, compassion, and unbreakable hope. For Matthew, it was liberation, the greatest forgiveness for past mistakes, and the miracle that allowed him to release all control and open his heart to life's greatest gift. And in that instant, the therapy center ceased to be a distant institution. It became the home of three souls, once lost and wounded, now reborn together. From the moment Samuel called Mommy in that Seattle therapy center, the three of them were never the same. Light and life ignited in every look, every breath, every hand squeeze on the flight back to New York. Destiny sensed a new Samuel, no longer terrified to hide in the shadows, but brave enough to smile, speak, walk, and truly call his parents by name. Back at the penthouse, the once cold, heavy atmosphere now overflowed with laughter, warmth, color, and the simple sounds of a real home. Mornings found Samuel racing around the living room, his little feet clicking on the hardwood, then scrambling onto a chair to demand that Destiny read him a story, or that Matthew draw a superhero, or that Mrs. Lorraine water the balcony plants. The walls of control had fallen. In their place were framed drawings, taped up artwork everywhere, and soft music playing every evening as the family dined together. Matthew, once a man hidden behind a hard, emotionless shell, now paused to listen, to hug his son, and to share every small worry or joy with Destiny. He began planning family picnics, preparing weekend breakfasts with his own hands, even baking cookies, albeit messily, to Destiny's teasing laughter as flowers scattered across the floor. The closer they grew, the more Matthew realized that happiness isn't about control or avoiding pain, but about opening your heart, facing it, and forgiving yourself and your loved ones. He was grateful to Destiny, not only for rescuing Samuel from the brink, but for teaching him again what hope, forgiveness, and new beginnings truly signify. One spring afternoon, when lavender blossoms filled the market stalls, Matthew led Destiny and Samuel to a small white house in the northern suburbs. It featured a welcoming porch, fields of pale purple flowers, and a spacious yard where Samuel could run freely under the sun. After a simple picnic among the blooms, Matthew knelt, took out a small ring, and looked into Destiny's eyes, bright with joy and misty with tears. You brought light back into this family. You taught me what love, courage, and faith truly are. Destiny, will you marry me? Be Samuel's mother and be our home. Words failed Destiny as tears streamed down her face. She nodded. Then the three of them embraced, their simple, profound happiness bursting into the warm spring air. From that day on, the little house by the lavender fields became Samuel's haven of love and growth, and the place where Matthew and Destiny healed old wounds together as they built a new future. Cozy dinners, laughter-filled mornings, family vacations, all stood as proof of the enduring power of love, the unquenchable flame of hope, and the truth that no matter how thick the darkness, a single spark and an outstretched hand can guide us back into the light. Destiny, Matthew, and Samuel's story concludes in a perfect happily ever after. But it also serves as a reminder of the power of hope, perseverance, and forgiveness. Sometimes miracles do not stem from grand gestures, but from a child's laugh, a timely helping hand, or the courage to change.